Thanks for tuning in to Minds of Tomorrow. I'm your host, Luis Acevedo, and today we have our first guest for the show, Thomas Frey, or Fry. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
It's Frey, yeah.
Fry. He is a futurist. He's the founder of the Da Vinci Institute. He's also started numerous businesses, as well as been awarded, I believe, IBM's most awarded engineer. Is that correct?
Right.
All right. So is there anything else that you would like to add about yourself?
Yeah, so when I was receiving a lot of awards at IBM, I found out that a person that has a lot of ideas ends up being a lot of work for everybody around them. So I ended up being a lot of work.
Right. And how long were you at IBM?
15 years.
Oh, nice. So did you end up going to school for some sort of engineering, or how did you end up there?
Right. I actually went to school for engineering, but I learned to become a programmer while I was at IBM.
Okay.
And this kind of set the stage for, in 2012, then we decided to do our own coding school at the Da Vinci Institute called Da Vinci Coders. And we were actually the second school in the country to start up like that. The first one was a group called Code Academy out of Chicago. And my son was working as a mentor for them. And so we got kind of inside scoop as to what they were doing. It looked quite interesting. So then we started up our school, and there was a huge demand for programmers, and there still is.
Right.
And so we started in 2012, and then by 2017, there was over 550 schools that had cropped up around the country. And that seemed like a good time for us to get out. One of the things that had happened is we focused on Ruby on Rails as the initial coding language. And then after everybody else started up with Ruby on Rails, and suddenly there was too many Rails programmers. So we had to branch off into Python and JavaScript and game design and a few other things. And it was quite interesting watching kind of the evolution of the coding world as all this was taking place. For the most part, people that graduate from college with a degree in computer programming, in computer science, they don't have, they don't actually get trained on programming. And so companies were looking for people that had programming skills. So we came to the conclusion that somebody that had roughly 1,000 hours of programming experience, that was enough to get them an entry-level position at some companies. And that's what we were looking at providing them. So this was the first of many certification type programs that started coming out of the woodwork. We started seeing AWS certifications catching on, then cloud management certifications from Google, then cybersecurity certifications. And now we're even seeing that IBM just started a quantum computing certification program. So if you look online, there are actually hundreds, if not thousands, of certification programs out there. And these certification programs are competing directly with college degrees right now. They take less time. You earn more money. It's very specific niche learning that takes place. And in general, you end up getting a well-paying job without a load of debt. And that's a big difference.
Right. Yeah. And I tried out Code Academy for a little bit, but I totally agree with you. My wife and I, we both went to college, and we completely agree. And everybody else we talk to seems to agree that the first 2 years you're in college is essentially glorified high school. You don't really get to start studying what you want to focus in. And that can kind of deter people from college. And also, it's just, why are you paying to take high school courses over again? But one thing, so basically your background has sort of led you to be into this position where you're at now as a futurist. And it's kind of weird that you do that for a living, right? Because I mean, what do? You just sort of come up with these ideas, speak, and philosophize about the future.
Right. There's not a lot of people that make a full-time living as a futurist, so I feel fortunate. Growing up as a kid, I had no idea that this position even existed.
Right.
And so I had to kind of invent the role of a futurist, partly along the way. There are some schools that teach people how to become a futurist in a more methodical fashion. University of Houston is one of the better known programs, but there's some in countries around the world as well. And the role of a futurist is to really to help people understand what the future holds, just to give them a better understanding of what the future is about to unleash on the world here. And there are some things that I can predict with a real high degree of probability, and there's some things that are really low degree of probability. As an example, I can predict that the building that you're in right now is still going to be there 6 months from now. I can predict that with a high degree of probability. Mm-hmm. I can predict that the Earth's going to travel around the sun in roughly the same orbit 100 years from now. I can predict that with a high degree of probability. The moon travels around the Earth, that we have the seasons, summer, winter, spring, and fall, that rising tides and lowering tides, that even if you put a handful of seeds in the ground, a certain percentage of them are going to grow. And so most of our future is being defined around slow, stable moving elements that are highly predictable. Mm-hmm. And so if, as an example, you're going to plan a birthday party 2 years or 2 weeks from now, you have enough confidence in everything that's around you that you can plan that with a high degree of probability that you can pull that off. So the areas that are the hardest to predict are things like the weather, anything to do with animals and people. And so it's our human systems and our human variables that make the big difference. So to the degree that you can get better at predicting the probability of what people will do, that can give you a huge advantage over your competition in the business world. So there's lots of ways of looking at the future. We're actually producing a course right now called Future Like a Boss.
I saw that on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're building out all of the modules and how to think like a futurist. It's a fascinating area of study. I've been using these different techniques, but for many years, but I just haven't put it into a course format to teach people. So we're doing that now.
Gotcha. So are these techniques things that you developed, or you gathered from other people that were already paving the way in this field?
Yeah, some of them are techniques that I've developed, and other ones are known techniques that we modified and use kind of in our own unique, special way.
Gotcha. Now, to backtrack a little bit, could you define what a futurist is exactly?
Generally, a futurist, the way I define it, is just somebody who's helps you expand your thinking about what the future will hold. Mm-hmm. You can get very specific on a topic like what the future of education is, or what the future of agriculture, or what the future of banking is going to be. There are some general futurists. I tend to be curious about a lot of things, so I get asked to give presentations on some fairly odd topics. The future of freedom was one that was I did recently in Korea, as they're always interested in how soon there's going to be a reunification of North and South Korea.
Right.
Doing topics on specific investment strategies and things like that. I've been asked to do that quite a few times. So there's some areas that lend themselves better, where just a little tiny insight can give somebody huge, massive advantage over the competition.
Right. So, like, what was it that got you into this, like the futurist, position that you're in currently? Like, how and why did you get into this?
When I was a kid growing up, I would see all the things coming out of Bell Labs. I would see the covers of Popular Science magazine and lots of other ones. And I couldn't wait for the future to happen. It was the most exciting thing ever. Um, Today, if you ask most young people about the future, it's there's great fear of the future. They're afraid of disease. They're afraid of being attacked by aliens. They're afraid of all the things that can go wrong, getting a hurricane, whatever. And so I would really like to make the future fun again. I think there's lots of massive possibilities out there. We have really kind of this bifurcating world right now where it's splitting in half. We have some people who are on one end, one extreme, where they're saying that technology is going to be the demise of all civilization. And other people are thinking just the opposite, that technology is going to be the savior of everything. And but most people tend to fall somewhere in the middle. But it's the Elon Musks and the Bill Gates and the Stephen Hawkings are warning us about general AI leading to the death of humanity. And then you have the other side of the coin, where you have the Ray Kurzweils, Rodney Brooks, and Kevin Kelly's that think that the singularity will lead us to become transhumanists, that we will evolve into something else, and that will save all of humanity. And so what's the right answer? So we have to somehow tread through the middle of all of this. Right now, there's huge fear of the technology outdating all of our jobs, taking all our jobs away.
You actually make a scary prediction. Well, not scary. I know you don't look at it as pessimistic, but more so objective, right? That within 2030, by 2030, you're predicting a couple billion jobs to be lost due to automation.
Yeah, we've actually had quite a few jobs going away already.
Right.
But the other side of the coin is that we're actually generating jobs at a faster rate than we're losing them. And in fact, there's a huge worker shortage right now, which is partly caused by by our political systems that we have in place, but going through COVID and everything, that's really messed things up. So we have lots of people who have taken time to actually take this introspective look at their lives. And they've come to the conclusion that, this isn't where I wanted to be at this point in my life. I wanted to be doing something more exciting, more fulfilling. And so they've come to the conclusion that their lives and their jobs lack meaning and purpose. And so we're seeing this massive transition. This is the biggest job transition in all history. Up to 40% of all people will have shifted to a different job by the time this is all over. And so here's something to keep in mind, though, that the same jobs that are the same technology that's automating jobs out of existence is the same technology that will be creating the new jobs. It'll be creating the new industries. And so we shouldn't be afraid of this technology. In fact, we need to embrace it. And that's what we should be focusing on with our education systems, is how to train people into working with AI, with sensors, with 3D printing, with flying drones, with driverless technology. All of these things, these are the things that are going to be creating the industries of the future. And so I actually think we're moving into a period of super employment. The big difference, though, is that in an era of super employment, it won't be full-time jobs, it'll be gigs.
So like freelancers is what you're saying, right?
Right.
more so free. Okay.
And the big problem is nobody's taught people how to be a good freelancer.
Right.
There's no, there's virtually no freelancer academies out there. There's colleges don't want to teach how to become a good freelancer because then you would quit and go off and start your own business. But if you're a freelancer, you have to be good at the business of you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know what it is you're selling, the services you're selling, how to quantify your skills and ability. You have to figure out how to price your services. You have to set up your own books. You have to learn how to do networking. You have to market yourself and how to sell yourself. And once you start going through the list of all of the things that you have to be good at, it's a staggering number. And virtually nobody is good at all of these things. And so they have to get help from others. And but the people that are going to be that are good at freelancing, it's going to be really a bright future ahead. And so we really need to start focusing on that sooner than later.
Yeah, I completely agree. I entirely agree. And there's a concept that you have, or an idea rather, that I heard you in one of your videos talk about. It's a couple of years old, I believe, but you said that the career ladder is going away and what's replacing it is the skill ladder. And that's essentially what you're describing here with the freelancing. And you also have this interesting idea too of the college killer, where you sort of have this. I read your blog post on this last night. This bubble of information that can tell you where your strengths and weaknesses are and help you improve in those areas. Like, what do you need to do to be more of a disciplined person? What books should you read? What videos should you watch? What courses should you take? And in return, that's going to help employers too, even if, because I'm sure there's still going to be obviously there's going to be employers. So anyway, the employers will have an easier time picking who they want as an employee, as opposed to having a resume or a credential, because as you rightfully point out, those credentials don't really tell you a whole lot about the person, other than maybe they were smart enough to get into this school, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have discipline or that, they are a hard worker or anything like that. So I thought those concepts were really cool that you had wrote. And I want to actually go back a little bit to when you brought up transhumanism with the futurist. Could you explain maybe the difference between the two? Because when, the average person begins to do a little bit of research into transhumanism, they're going to see a connection between the two. However, there's differences there, and I don't think they're apparent right away.
Yeah. So I'll take you down a couple different paths here. So part of the thinking is that as machine intelligence starts to exceed human intelligence, and that's somewhere around the 2029 to 2045 timeframe, that we can turn this intelligence around to start solving all of our human problems, including the problem of human aging and the degradation of our bodies. Now, if you, this is what gets into this notion of the singularity. And the singularity is that when things speed up to a point where everything changes all at once, and the things that come out of the singularity are radically different than what we currently view as human life today. So if you think about even a few years from now, a lady who is pregnant, after she finds out she's pregnant, her first stop will be to go to her local geneticist and go through a checklist of options on how to enhance the unborn child. And she'll probably have the options of a checklist that has like 1,000, 1,500 different options that she can pick from. And it's not just whether they have freckles or whether they have dimples. It's the wrist rotation or some of the thinking skills and thinking patterns. And there's going to be all kinds of unusual options we'd never considered in the past. But it raises this real interesting question of what is the lifetime value of a superhuman? A superhuman, very likely this lady, when she picks out all the right formula and everything, she's going to give birth to a super baby that grows up to become a superhuman.
Mhm.
So what is the lifetime value of this superhuman over their lifetime? Could it possibly be 100x? Could it be 100 times greater than the value of an average human? They're healthier, they're stronger, they're smarter, they're more capable, they're more resilient and flexible. You have all of these attributes built into this future human. And then if that's the case, I mean, if suddenly we're able to prove that this child growing up is going to be 100 times more valuable than other humans, then suddenly we have this mad race to create more superhumans. And very likely, whenever a lady finds out they're pregnant, they're going to get invited into some resort so that they can be have all the right food, and they can have a kind of a cushy lifestyle until the time comes for them to give birth. And then it becomes this mad race between countries as to which country has the most superhumans. And that becomes a scenario of a possibility for getting to the singularity. Is CRISPR the pathway to the singularity? That might be one of the ingredients. Who knows? But that it opens up some really interesting discussion points that are both frightening and exciting all at the same time.
Right. No, I completely agree. And that's why I think I'm sure you're familiar with Hugo D. Gares, I believe it's how you pronounce his name. He's he works on artificial intelligence. I believe he even worked with Ben Gortzel for some time. And he has a different, like he talks about what you're talking about, but more so with the robotic side of things, that we're going to experience this Artilic war, I believe is what he calls it. It's like artificial intelligence combined into one word, war, where humans are going to feel, displaced because of what's coming down the pipe with the robots. And we're going to see assassinations of what he predicts will be one day a field is brain architects. So like CEO brain architects and things of this nature. They'll be, potentially getting assassinated, and other people will be maybe vandalizing these robotic manufacturers and things of that kind. And you could also see something along those lines with just enhancing, as you call it, superhumans, right? Because you then have the potential of running into a what's it called? A CHAS system like they have in India. So then you run into, you can run into a situation like that because initially the average person probably is not going to have access to this medical care, I would assume, because it's typically how it works is the wealthier are the ones who are paying the big dollars for these experimental procedures until they're perfected, and then it trickles down. And so you have this issue of maybe getting left behind, especially if you have so many superhumans, right? That are wealthier before you get down to the commoner. Now, with this, like, how do you remain optimistic of the future when you have these scenarios playing out, whether it be robots taking over or you have these enhanced humans that are just, outpacing the other humans that maybe not have the resources to get that?
So it's real easy to jump 10 levels ahead and start making assumptions about how life will be.
You're right. Yeah.
In general, we're not automating jobs out of existence. We're automating tasks out of existence. And so rather than thinking of robotics and AI as us versus them, it'll be us with them. Mm-hmm. These become the tools that we use for achieving things. these things generally don't work without humans involved. There's always somebody who owns them, somebody who directs them, somebody. And so if we think about AI and robotics being tools in our toolbox that we can use, that gives us a whole different perspective on how this will unfold. So if in the past, I've always thought about, somebody who has a toolbox is more valuable than somebody without. Somebody who has a robot is more valuable than somebody without. Somebody with a computer is more valuable than somebody without. And so we've adapted to using all of these technologies. And so we're going to be getting better at working with them. So as an example, in the education world, rather than having a teacher in the front of a classroom teaching us something, this idea of having our own personal AI teacher bot that we're talking back and forth to, this thing is our buddy. It's constantly asking us questions. It's probing us. It understands things about us. We can get very personal, very intimate. This thing is. It starts to understand us in ways that we've never imagined. And it will be able to assess what skills we're proficient in, what skills we're deficient in, and it'll know what it'll take to bring us up to speed. And it's constantly feeding us new information to learn along the way to help improve that skill set. And over time, we will grow along with this little AI teacher bot. And we're going to be, there'll be a codependency, if you will. And we become intensely bright as a result of working with this little device. And that's a radically different vision than kind of most of the people are thinking about in the education world right now. And so I see there's no one size fits all formula for education, but this is leading us into the right direction, I believe. And so I'm actually advising different companies on AI education companies that are, excuse me, working on things similar to this.
Gotcha. So do you see the future having more narrow AI than general intelligence AI?
Yeah, I think it's narrowed to a point. And I'm not sure that we really know where the danger zone is yet. We've interviewed people on the Futurati podcast that are college professors, and it's their mission is to actually save humanity from
the general intelligence,
general AI. Yeah,
right.
So yeah, so they're working on ideas of how do we build in Achilles heels? How do we build in off switches? How can we control this thing? If it gets really smart, it can always work its way around. But none of it answers the question in my mind of why. Why would it do it? What's the motivation behind it? And so you have an AI that takes over the entire world. Then what?
Right.
Yeah. What does it do with the world? I mean, that none of that makes sense to me. So
yeah, no, that's a good question. You don't hear that why. It's so simple. It's such a simple question, but you don't hear that often when we're talking about artificial intelligence. But I have heard somebody suggest that if it's even possible for artificial general intelligence to get to that level, some people dispute that. I'm not sure where I stand. I don't really know enough, but anyway, some people will, state that the reason why humans may, experience or be in danger because of these artificial general intelligence, the AGI, is because they'll eventually look at us like ants or some other bug. Like if they're trying to build whatever they're building to optimize their break off civilization, essentially, they may see it okay to destroy maybe that country or that city. So I don't know. What do you think about that as a why? So more so just like just an inadvertent thing.
But everything breaks down. Try to just work through this in your mind. What what devices, what technology do you use today that you bought 10 years ago? That's going to be a really short list.
Mhm.
I mean, there's probably some cars, maybe a lawnmower, something like that, but virtually all technology breaks down, including AI. AI and computers and robots, they all break down. Now, can an AI direct somebody to come and fix it, or robots to come fix it? Well, eventually. I mean, that's a much later stage of this technology. We're a long ways from that.
Mhm.
So all of this stuff is going to break down, and humans break down too. I mean, we reach a certain age and we just don't go much farther than that. So when you start to think about, is it possible to have a forever technology, some sort of an AI intelligence that lives on forever? It's actually really hard for me to conceive of how that would still function, and this overarching goal and purpose and everything would
Mhm.
be for that. And it this all hit home several years ago. I used to have a lot of fish in this aquarium, and there's this one fish that I bought and put it in there, and the fish managed to go in and kill all the other fish. And then I thought to myself, okay, now what? You're just there all alone. You have nothing else to do other than kill fish. That's your goal in life, apparently. Now what? And
Right. Right. Well, and who knows? We may have this benevolent AI, like in have you ever read the Foundation series by yep.
Isaac Asimov. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. As you probably recall, there's, the benevolent AI, the robot essentially that's helping save the galactic empire. So who knows? Maybe we'll have something like that and there'll be nothing to worry about, right?
Yeah.
But I did want to circle back around to the breaking down, because that's a really good point too. We go through these ebbs and flows and an evolution, a progression, and obviously, I can't think of technology that I'm using aside from a TV, but the TVs have even advanced in the past 10 years, right?
Yeah.
But with everything break, so you're going to have the need for people to fix these things. And one of the things that you talk about are the jobs of the future, jobs that don't exist yet. So are there any jobs as a, entrepreneur, if you were coming to age in a time where these things were, going to be feasible to do in your lifetime, are there any particular industries that you would focus in? And then what niche in that industry would you focus in?
Yeah. Well, the most think in terms of what's going to be the most destructive technology that's going to automate jobs out of existence, like artificial intelligence, like robotics. Um, those are the things that I would actually focus on, because those are the ones that are going to lend themselves to the new industries. We're going to use that technology not to just disrupt existing business, but to create future business. And so if you think of, I use this kind of crazy example of driverless cars. If you think of somebody that wants to start a speed dating business with driverless cars, where two strangers actually get into a car and then they speed around, and it's actually speed dating. And then they get out 5 minutes later. That's one example of a weird business model that might catch on.
Yeah. I'm sure
Uh,
we're going to see a lot of weird things like that. Like you also, like one thing, a job would that you envisioned may come to fruition one day is the God globe, somebody having to control the God globe. Could you maybe go into detail as, because you even brought up like there's things that we can't predict, such as I mean, there's to a certain degree, we can predict hurricanes, human nature, all these things. But with the convergence of data on a mass scale, as we're going to see, you think that we're going to have this God globe and there's going to be people controlling it, which sorry, going to be kind of a compound question here, but also when you were talking about the superhumans, you said countries may fight each other for who's going to have the best humans. But with a system like a God globe, that would kind of require, I would assume, a global government. So, um, how do you see that playing out in the future as far as the governance of this? And yeah, so
let's dive into this on a smaller scale, just a
okay,
citywide
yep,
system. And very soon, cities will have drones flying overhead on a regular basis that are mapping out the city. And they're going to be able to, we're going to be able to search on things in ways that we've never been able to search on in the past. So as we get more and more sensor technology, we're going to be able to search on, I want something with this smell, with this taste, with this harmonic vibration, with this specific gravity, with this texture, with this level of reflectivity. Now, we don't have to know how this is all doing it, but this gives rise to the search engine for the physical world. And so you just put a search query in, something like, where is that dog with rabies right now? And you can get a near real-time result from that just because of drones flying over a city, and they're crafting a detailed digital replica of the city. They're creating a digital twin of the city, and that digital twin is going to get more and more higher resolution as we go along. Now, some of the things we can add into that is just infrared scanners that can detect if somebody is living or if they're dead. And we can tell if somebody's alive or if they're not alive. And being able to know when somebody dies in some odd part of a city is worth a lot, because then you can find out what actually might have happened there. It might set off an alert that somebody just died over here and there's nobody around them.
so to interject really quick, I think this is also, maybe I'm wrong in assuming this, but then the humans would also have to have sensors, correct, in order for this thing to detect them. Am I wrong in assuming
Not,
that?
not, not necessarily. I mean,
Okay.
I think as infrared technology improves, we're going to get to a point of being able to do an infrared fingerprint of every living being on the planet. And so infrared technology is pretty sloppy right now. You can't tell the difference between a human and a cow, as an example, or a human and a dog or a deer. In the future, I think you'll be able to actually identify what kind of creature or person that is. And so then you'll be able to remotely monitor things. Now, there's naturally all kinds of things that can go wrong. This opens the door for all kinds of intrusions into our life that we just don't want. We need some level of privacy. And I explained this to people that a lot of people are radical transparency advocates. They think that if we know everything about everybody, that we're suddenly going to live in a much safer world. But see, if I know everything about you, then I know what your bank account numbers are, what your credit card numbers, what your passwords are. And suddenly we lose our ability to own things. And so we need a privacy bubble around every person, but that privacy bubble has not been defined legally. It hasn't been defined technologically. And as technology evolves, each time we try to put some boundaries around what that looks like, it continues to shift and change with the technology. So we've got a challenging time ahead trying to define what this privacy of the future is going to look like. At the same time, the technology is giving us the ability to spot things sooner and quicker than ever before. Now, as technology improves, we are putting more and more power in the hands of individuals. People are becoming much more destructive. And so it becomes incumbent upon officials then to try to mitigate the damage that a person might do. Somebody might be just a normal citizen for 20 years, and then something happens in their life and they decide to go off the deep end. We need to be able to detect that at a sooner point than ever before. We need to be able to drive that down to kind of the initial time that they start going off the deep end, so that we can start mitigating damages sooner than ever before. And
So
that's where the problem comes in.
right. So sort of like red flag laws is what you're saying when it comes to like gun ownership. How I believe there's some states that may have red flag laws, and then that also, brings us closer to like a Minority Report future, which also makes people a little fearful. However,
Right.
one thing you did say that would probably alleviate some fear is don't have to worry about the mark of the beast. Then if everything's just going to be infrared and you don't need to be, have a chip in your hand, like, a lot of people talk about that. And that's a big fear of the future, is, getting implanted so the government can track you. But from what you're saying is there's a possible future where that's not needed. And I think that probably be enticing to a lot of people because it's not as invasive as having to put
Right.
some machinery in your body. Although I do think that fear is a little nonsensical because we already have medical procedures to sort of make you a cyborg in a way, right?
Yeah.
But don't want to take up much more of your time. So just to wrap, were you going to say something?
Yeah, kind of the trend line is to take the vast information world out there on the internet and make the interface between our brain, our mind, and the information world as seamless and as invisible as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I often talk about the 10-second interface. And somebody asks you a question, and we have the ability to think our way into this vast information world and come up with an answer. That's the challenging thing that we're wrestling with right now, is how can we do that? And how can we do it in a way that still maintains the privacy of what's in our mind without leaking it out to other people? And without getting corrupted along the way,
Right.
setting us off into some psychotic state or something.
Right.
So we have no shortage of challenges ahead.
Yes, it's definitely challenging, but at least people like you are thinking about these things and trying to maybe come up with solutions. And hopefully more people will be open to this. But the way I see it is a lot of people are not going to really have this on their radar for years to come. For instance, I'm big into cryptocurrencies. That's something that I'm really fascinated in, and I love seeing this switch of economic infrastructure, which, in my opinion, is the foundation for the new world that we're living in. I think the economy and
Right.
the culture are intertwined. They're one. They depend on each other. And as we're entering into this digital age, we're going to then be able to have, I think, a more advanced futurist world. But what I was going to say real quick, last question for you before we wrap it up, the digital twins, do you think maybe that would be a way to prevent maybe any kind of like personal information being stolen to retain some sort of privacy? That digital twin, I know that obviously you're online, you can get hacked, etc. But in a ever advancing digital world, it almost seems that there will be some companies paying, or creating designs to really protect your digital identity, which would in turn protect you on the physical realm.
Right. Yes, that's actually a really good question. Digital twin technologies started not that many years ago, that this idea that we were able to put sensors on pieces of technology and be able to monitor them remotely. And whether that's like a big earth moving vehicle used in construction, or whether it's a cruise ship, or whether it's a turbine in a power plant, being able to monitor these things is opening up the door so that people halfway around the world can tell when something's about ready to break down. And then we can start anticipating these failures and schedule maintenance and upgrades to prevent that from happening. Now, the next generation of digital twins is remote robotics, so that then we not only monitor things from a long ways away, we can also start controlling them. So rather than having a tractor that has a live person on it driving it through a field, you can have somebody remotely doing that from a long ways away. And so it opens up the door for lots of questions. I mean, how long before we can actually eliminate having pilots on the planes that we're flying, and we can have that plane controlled by somebody on the ground? If you think about the advantages of doing that, then we could seal up the cockpit of these planes, and we probably wouldn't need near as much security than at the airports. All of that starts to go away, and it makes it much more efficient to jump on a plane and take off. How much longer before we actually have sensors that we put all over our body, and our doctor can tell us directly what's going on with our body just because they can monitor it remotely. But it opens the door for lots of interesting questions as we move forward. And so having a digital twin that protects us as well as monitors us, now that opens the door for some real interesting opportunities that I'm not sure have been thought through very well up to this point. So yeah, that's a great question though.
Awesome. Well, I really do appreciate you coming on the show. And just to, summary, you're optimistic about the future. You think that we're going to work hand in hand with this technology as it progresses, and it's going to better both of us, essentially, is what your belief is. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's definitely things that are going to go wrong, but I think we're moving into a better state of the world. We're much more aware of things happening all over the world than ever before in history. And this awareness is giving us new opportunities to solve problems that we kind of got brushed under the rug in the past. And I think there's some huge opportunities. If somebody wants to make a difference, they can really do that today.
Awesome. Now, are there anything that you would like to, I guess I'll just call it shill for yourself, like any place where people can go to find you, or things that they can purchase of yours, or anything like that?
Sure. So if somebody's interested, we have a Futurati podcast, futuratiPodcast.com. We have quite a few episodes up there. If you want to find out more about what I do as a speaker, go to futuristspeaker.com. You can read about the books that I have, and a lot of the columns that I write, and a lot of what we do through the Da Vinci Institute. We have consulting agreements with different companies. Go to davinciinstitute.com. And so I want to thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, of course. And I'll be sure to post the links to those things in my description. And I'll also share the video with you as well, so you can see. But yeah, thank you for coming, and I hope you have a good rest of your day, man.
All right. Super. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Take care.